Stan, what was your first take?
Well, man, I was kind of blown away. As Lucas was mentioning, coming into this report, a week ago, the consensus estimate on new subs for this upcoming first quarter was about 4.1 million. Then it moved up to, across the board about 4.8, 4.9 million. As Lucas was mentioning earlier, there were some analysts out there that came out with reports in the last couple of days that had estimates, 5 to 6 million, which I wasn't quite sure where they're going to hit that number. But then they blew it out with this 9.3 million. So it was just really an unbelievable number. I was really kind of taken back by it, Romaine and Scarlett.
Yeah, I'm curious about the pricing strategy that Netflix is taking. Alex Steele was speaking a little bit earlier here about the highest price tier and whether that's actually helping growth or not, but also the idea of how Netflix's pricing sits relative to some of the other streaming services, which now, to a certain extent, almost seem like a relative bargain.
Yeah, I think the big thing, Romaine, coming in this report, their average U.S. Standard membership is around $16. And, you were talking earlier about some of these new initiatives that they have in practice with the password share, where, a group of people can still share a password at a higher price. And then you look at the ad tier models, I think they're around $6.99 a month, and then they're making up the rest of it with the actual advertisements. But Romaine and Scarlett, I think they're pretty competitive. You look at Disney, you look at all the other big streamers that are out there. I couldn't say that Netflix was the highest priced of all of them. There are some lower priced ones, but they don't have the same content, the same series, and the same deck of movies. So I think you kind of get what you pay for when it comes to streaming.
What is your best guess for why the stock is trading lower in after-hours trading? I know that it's had quite a run-up so far this year, up about 25%, but over the past month, it's pretty much been kind of flat, and this was as analysts were raising their estimates on revenue and on EPS.
Scarlett, it's got to be that release that you mentioned at the end of the call about not coming forthright with new sub information in future quarters. We know that Netflix trades on the sub data, right, on the new membership subscriptions. And the fact that they're not going to give us those guides, I think, is something that makes it that much more difficult to really look underneath the hood and kind of find out how they're driving, let's say, for example, this revenue and earnings beat. Because always in the past, Scarlett and Romaine, whenever I've been following Netflix forever, it's always been on that sub data that I look at. I don't even really listen. I hear the revenues and earnings, but I'm just zeroed in that total subscriber number, which they were, 269 million? The street was at 265. And then, of course, that huge beat. I didn't think they were going to do it. I thought the hurdle was going to be too high on that first quarter sub number, but they blew it out. So okay,
if they're no longer going to give that quarterly read out, what are they trying to signal to investors, to someone like you? Hey, we're not going to give you this detail, so we want you to pay attention to what instead?
It's interesting, Scarlett. It's kind of similar to what Apple did when they no longer gave us iPhone unit volume. Do you remember that? Where we would get that number and we could charge, average selling prices and get total revenue for iPhone. So now we're always guessing, based on what that revenue number is. So it's now going to become somewhat similar with Netflix, where they're going to give us a revenue and earnings number, and they'll give us little bits and pieces, and then we're going to have to kind of piece together, like, well, based on that, and the average price of membership is $15, what does that mean in terms of total new subs? So it just creates less information when we're craving for more information, right? And Apple did the same thing a couple years ago. And now we still come out with that iPhone unit volume estimate, right?
Yeah.
We're going to do the same thing with the sub data out of Netflix.
Perhaps